Welcome everybody. I'm joined today as usual by Alex White from Carers New South Wales, who co-presents this series with myself, Michelle Meacham at TAFE New South Wales. Okay, so webinar 5 is we've named independence through enterprise. So our focus of today's session is to have a look at working for yourself, so in some type of self-employment capacity or with a group of like-minded peers. But essentially, all of our other webinars have been very focused on working for an employer. Today's one is about working for yourself, and so we want to be able to give you the experience of our carer in profile is a business owner, and I'm going to introduce her shortly, and then we're going to have a look at some resources and information about self-employment, which I know a lot of us have quite an appetite for. Okay. I also will take this opportunity right now to acknowledge the traditional custodians. We're meeting across many lands virtually on many country. I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the traditional custodians and pay respect to elders past, present and emerging, and in particular recognise the lessons of kinship and care that have been passed through generations to us. I extend that respect to all Aboriginal members joining us in today's webinar. Thank you. Okay, our carer in profile, for those that are regular visitors to the webinars, our carer in profile is usually a pre-recorded session. We're going to do our carer in profile session live today. So I'd like to take this opportunity to warmly welcome Tracy Ellen, who is our carer in profile. Her carer type, as you may be seeing on the screen, is supporting family members that access the National Disability Insurance Scheme. Similar to me, she is Generation X, and Tracy lives out in the Hunter region of New South Wales, and she is a business owner and entrepreneur, and one of her businesses is featured in the corner there that we may focus on in today's interview, Creative Cook's Kitchen, and we'll provide you with a link to that in the resource pack. So I'm going to drop out of the screen now. Because you don't want to see those slides. We'd like to see Tracy. Okay. All right, so as I said, Tracy has kindly agreed to join us today. We are going to take the interview live, and Tracy's also happy to stay behind and answer some questions. So if questions are occurring for you, or you'd like to make some comments, use the chat pod function while Tracy's speaking, and then we'll take some time out afterwards and very happy to speak to you, and we will be giving you Tracy's contact. Full disclosure, I was really lucky in the last just perhaps 2 or 3 months ago to be able to have Tracy come on board to the carer to career team at TAFE New South Wales. So we now coordinate the carer program at TAFE. So you, if you haven't already had the chance to meet her, you're very likely to be seeing a lot more of her in 2021 with our various programs in carer to career. Okay, so welcome Tracy, and thank you so much for your time today. I thought perhaps if you're happy to share a bit about the type of business that you have and what led you to opening a business and becoming self-employed. Where did you get to make that decision? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle, and to Alex for having me today, and really love being able to share a bit of my story with you. So the business that we're sort of featuring today is Creative Cook's Kitchen, and it's been, I guess, a combination of many, many years and time. I actually started off as a chef early in my life, and then I also went into early childhood education, and so those two particular careers have always sort of been intertwined a lot throughout my path. And then when I had a child who is now 16 and he was diagnosed with autism, things started to unfold even more. It was almost like a little origami forming in my life. So I saw a need for inclusive activities for children. At the time when he was diagnosed, he was 7.5, and going to, take him to extracurricular things outside of school was always a challenge. We had a child who would, get oversensitive and not deal with noise and clutter, and lots of different sensory things were coming into play for him. So he would, have meltdowns or not cope. So he would, retreat back to me. And so we were finding, him engaging in activity is really quite a challenge. And it sort of started opening my mind to the fact that maybe there's more that can be done in some of these types of businesses. Business for me sort of started to unfold many years before Creative Cooks got formed. We actually started supporting my husband in his own business, which is a tech-based business, and I really was just the back end, someone who would help him with the accounts and maybe advice around who he might, recruit to help him in his business. It sort of whet my appetite to think about maybe could I, get into that space? And so we sort of together have sort of worked really closely to be able to bring our businesses together. And Creative Cooks still, I'd say, is in a forming stage. We've had lots of, to's and fro's and many hurdles along the way. But hopefully we're sort of in a place now where we can sort of start seeing the fruits of all the work that we've been doing, so which I can tell you more about later. I can't hear you.
That's because I was on mute. Sorry. You touched a bit about on your son and the fact that you like most of us became a carer, and some of the the impact of his supports and the various developmental milestones that he was experiencing and things like that. I guess probably what many of us are interested in is does self-employment work for carers? When I think about it, I think of that sort of in a visionary sense. I think it makes a lot of sense to me that that this would be a space which would allow me to give to both roles and not necessarily be tied to the structure that perhaps an employer will have in place. But yeah, how has self-employment supported you in your carer role?
Yeah, look, I think that's a really good question, and I often reflect on that one because, as you say, I think having your own business is definitely you hold the reins. You're the one that's in control and can decide when and where you work, all those sorts of things. But having said that, there are things that challenge you as well as a self-employed person, and that sort of comes into the fact that once you start getting a really good name and reputation in a business, clients need you, don't they? So that's going to always be that competing demand between what you actually set out to achieve is flexibility. And so for us, we've found probably the most important focus for us is to ensure that when we develop a model in our business, that it's not me-centric. So it has to be something that I can pass on to either the next generation or to the next person who comes along and wants to be sort of mentored in that space. And I think that's where, there's some micro businesses that work, maybe something where you're creating something that you go to a market and you sell, that you can sort of keep to that scope, you know what I mean? And you can sort of pick and choose which markets you go to. Whereas when you're actually a service-based business, which is what Creative Cooks is, as well as our swim school that we operate, very centric on the fact that someone's got to be there to deliver the program. And one big thing about all our programs is it is an all-inclusive program. So we custom make programs for individuals based on their needs and their goals, even if they don't have NDIS, or if they do, it doesn't matter. And I think that's where, yeah, it can definitely be challenging. You know, you get this flexible mindset, but I must say, being able to work in and around with my husband, for example, is probably a huge blessing as well, because one of us is at least around when my son needs a parent to take him somewhere or do therapy or all those different things, and the other one can then be putting the time in the business. But it definitely takes, I guess it probably means our business does grow smaller and slower than maybe something that you know, if you had the whole time to dedicate to it, if you didn't have the caring as a factor.
Okay.
Mm.
So I guess you've talked about where there's advantage around flexibility, and at the same time as the growth comes along, and you know the sort of initial moves from concept to implementation, what you found to be you know a good formula for your enterprise is to actually share that with someone else, and in your case your husband.
Yes.
So perhaps maybe one of the would it be reasonable to sort of say lessons learned might be to actually not go into this in a solo capacity, but actually consider working with others?
Yeah, look, I think it's definitely something that needs to, you know, you have to contemplate before going into business. You know, I think when we first started off, you know, we didn't know where we would end up, but, you know, I guess both of us, myself and husband, are both educators. You know, we both come up in the ranks where we've worked in community type programs in the past, and have got a really strong sense of how to mentor someone, and the fact that we're only as good as what we put in each day. And so unless you can sort of share that out, then the viability of your business, yeah, I think sort of sits sitting there on a weighing bridge. You know what, you know, it can go from one to the other very easily if you've got the right people versus the wrong people in your business. Yeah, no, it's definitely a tricky one to think about. And you know, when we first started, we definitely didn't really anticipate maybe that, but at the same time we've sort of had to just work our way through those little hurdles. And as I say, having him the two mainstays all the time has made a huge difference for it to be able to keep on going. Whereas I have seen other people in my life where they've tried to get, you know, businesses up and going, and if they haven't got that really close other person, often it tends to be put, you know, away. It has to go back in the box while you're caring, all that sort of stuff. You have to put it on hold. So
yeah. Any tips about on the caring side of things? Is there things that you've adjusted in your caring role to, I guess, you know, be able to invest also in growing that career for yourself? Like, I think you were mentioning to me once before that you made a conscious decision about how to manage NDIS, for example, as a way of, you know, perhaps, are you happy to share a bit about that?
yeah, sure. I guess as you say, sort of choosing to go into business can be very consuming. And so when we, you know, realised that we had a son with a disability, we had to sort of, you know, make a conscious commitment to each other. That's me and my hubby, around the fact that when one was working, the other one needed to be supporting him or to be available for that. You know, we're very fortunate that he actually really loves going to school and has really engaged really well with school, so it gives us a good block of time. When it came to applying for the NDIS, I was sort of the person who sort of push that forward for him. But I did notice that there was limitations on how much I could do, being that I'm caught up a lot in admin through my business, and particularly accounts, and dealing with that finite information. So we ended up going with an agency managed plan over going something where I have to plan everything, because obviously I do a lot of that in my other parts of my life, and it sort of has given me sort of a bit of a break between doing that. Having said that, though, I guess we've had to find the right fit for the people that he's involved with for his NDIS plan, so his support workers, and we're still having to juggle that. At the moment he's 16, as I was saying, so we're starting to engage support workers so that he can be out in the community more independently without us constantly there with him. And so we're still having to sort of vet those people, even though we've got someone who actually does that full recruitment process and, charges the NDIS for, their time and all those things. So it's, I guess, understanding what you're capable of and know your limitations is important as a carer. We had been given a small amount a couple of times. A couple of the NDIA planners were like, "Oh, are you sure you don't want to self-manage some? You'll have more flexibility." And that might be true. But for us, we just had to stick to our guns and go, you know what, that's just going to tip me over if I have to do any more of that admin.
But I think it's a really good point about just that whole reflection about I can do this, and this could be the way forward for me, but I can't do it and expect that everything's going to stay the same. So I think it's a really good way of looking at how there's always going to be adjustments, whether you go and work for someone else or you enter into, bringing something into the world yourself as self-employed person. But to me, no matter which decision I make work-wise, it's always, then about I won't be able to keep the rest of those, ducks lined up all the time and things like that. So I think it's a really good example to think about, okay, what are big ticket items in my carer role, and will I still be able to do them? Do I still want to be able to do them? And what do I, what other ways could I actually look at, being able to maintain the lifestyle and the experiences I want for the person that I love, and be able to work in a different way, and I don't necessarily see that differently to working for an employer, but it is really good, that people that are self-employed are often thinking about where might those other trade-offs be. People that have done that support coordination course would have heard me say plenty of times, if you are the best person to be the support coordinator, do that and have a look at what else you could outsource for in your carer role and things like that. And I think it's a really good example of that. Thank you. Okay, so lots of us have no doubt fantasized about how we might make a difference in the world, and I've probably been one of those people that has come up with, many different, seed ideas and visions and things like that about how I would like to leave impact on the world and the things that are important to me. What I don't often do is take it from that vision and that, that great concept and actually bring it to life. So I guess I think many of us would like to know, how do you actually move that idea, from starting to launching, what's reasonable to expect about, how much time that might take, or perhaps what assistance that you got on the way, those sorts of things.
Yeah, another good one to think about. And we've had our business since, well, it's actually probably 16 years old as well. We actually opened the business the year my eldest son, autistic son, was born, and originally it was very much based on hobbies, things that both of us were interested in. So the cooking, for example, we had a small little catering operation that we would do on weekends, and then hubby would design websites and help other people with business tech, in his time off. And so I guess for us, we just went really, really slow. Number one, we were new parents. We were newly married. We were looking at hopefully moving somewhere where we could sort of set ourselves down, so buying our first home, and we did that, sort of in those first few years. And so we kept our active employment, our other stuff going while we tested things. And of course, that has pros and cons, but I think that's how we've kept it going. The other thing too, I've always kept some employment in the back end as well. As Michelle said, I've taken on some work with TAFE New South Wales this year, and a few of you, if you know me, I wear quite a few different hats. And I do that to empower me to keep going. I find it's a really good source of inspiration. It really keeps my finger on the pulse of what's going on out there in the community, not only as a carer, but then people out there in the workplace, or people looking for work, that type of connections. And I guess the biggest move for us was when Walter, my husband, he became retrenched and from his job, and he was like, oh, what do I do? And I'm like, well, I'm in almost a full-time gig at that time, with working for someone else, and I said, well, how about, we're in a good place, we bought our home, and I'm paying a very small mortgage, and let's take the risk. And we did. We took the risk of then developing his tech business. So again, it was just little pieces at a time. That gradually grew from being, running out of the back of our house, to employing about 6 other people. And I helped with that sort of recruitment process. During that time, while he was retrenched and we needed a bit of extra cash flow, I actually retrained to be a swim teacher on top. So I was looking at upskilling. So upskilling is another powerful manoeuvre that I'm constantly doing. It never stops for me. So with the swim school, that came through from me taking a seed from his, book of, what was going on in his world, and going, okay, well, I need to keep bringing in some money so that he can hopefully get into a place that he feels more in control of with his employment. And I was lucky enough to get some work through a government department to run some swim programs. And then from there, my eyes just lit up, and it was an awakening, where I was like, yeah, I think our area really calls for an inclusive swim school. So that's where we've gone. And the other thing is, I actually got my husband trained as a swim teacher as well. I was able to con him into that, as you would say. So, yeah, it's been little bits, building and building. For some people, they're lucky enough they can put the seed in and it grows into this monstrous tree, and, never fades, the evergreen tree. Whereas I would consider myself as more probably multiple plants, or plants from evergreen sometimes to the autumn leaves coming off, if you can think of the analogy that, things come, they die, ideas fly in, fly out. It's always, as you say, that dynamicness of business is always there. Dealing with COVID and the bushfires in both businesses has been challenging. So, it's an interesting, isn't it, where you sort of get your inspiration from and how these things come. But as I say, I would say mine's been just little bit by little bit.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think there's sort of 2 themes coming through there, and both of them sit around contingency planning. So, having the contingency of having somebody else in the business space with you, and also the contingency planning. I'm getting a little bit of a threat on my end. Am I coming through clear still?
Not too bad. There's occasional echo. Yeah.
Sorry. So the contingency planning about having somebody with you on the journey, but also the contingency planning about okay, what if it does take a little while to get off, or off the ground, or what if we need to consider, this week I can only input so much into the business, and I may need to go. And so I think that point about upskilling, and I know with the programs that we've had over this year, I guess that could be a way that lots of people could look at. Well, I don't necessarily want to work in, say, support coordination or plan management, but I could work for an employer there while I'm getting my own my
Yes.
own thing up and going and things like that. So
Yes.
I think those really two strong points around contingency planning, having the eyes open about there's a range of things that can happen, and also there's a range of ways that you might be able to put some insurance around that, which I think would go over anywhere, like really well business wise and things like. So I might actually now just ask, seeing as though we have got you here this morning, I might throw out now to our audience if anybody would like to ask Tracy questions, or perhaps wants to share that they've got a bit of an idea or something that you took away from the conversation. And feel free to either jump on mic, or if you want to put in the chat pod, and Alex will let us know.
I'm wondering if Gladys, is it Gladys asking, putting a hand up?
Are you interested in something like this, Gladys?
Actually, it's been long time. I was thinking about it. I had already the meeting with the Blacktown Council, what you call this officer, the one that is in charge with this entrepreneur thing.
Yeah,
However,
great.
yeah, it was just that one. It was firing really that I needed to start at that moment. However, one reason that stopped me from doing it was that my husband did told me that he was so sorry um, to be with me, joining with me with my plan because he's focusing with his job as well. Apparently, I said, "Oh my God, yes." And you know how when you start with something being entrepreneur, you have to have your partner to I guess to start with because otherwise the immediate support you have, otherwise it can be tricky. I might be doing same thing, but it might be related to this NDIS business, I guess, because with this one I am familiar with, and on how to I got an idea. Yes, so yeah, I could fail that yeah, I could somehow, but then yeah, I know the process, it's not easy, so it's just hanging in there. Yeah,
Mm.
but in saying that, yes, I am interested. Thank you.
Great. And potentially on the hunt for a partner.
A
Not
business partner.
not a life
A
not a
business
life
partner.
partner, a business partner. So potentially looking for a like-minded person, Gladys.
Yeah, and in saying that, with this business that I am I am considering this like NDIS related one, so at least I could hire somebody for as long as I know how to manage, how to connect myself to the people, like networking, collaboration. I think that should be fine. Yeah, rather than my thought before of doing this business like cleaning business, something like that. That's the one that I needed my husband to get involved with me because with these other um
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you. I can see that Alex's hands up.
Hi, Tracy. I just thought I was interested in employees or how have you had other employees? Just that Gladys kind of raised that
Yes.
idea. And
yeah, absolutely. So with our web business, we have about 6 staff members that come in casually, depending on the type of projects that we run. We probably have about the same in our swim business. It's a seasonal swim business, so it sort of operates between sort of April is our end date, and then we start again back in October, so sort of that 6 months of the year. So we employ people obviously on a casual basis, and they sort of are aware of the fact that that's limited. Having said that, I do try to, if I see someone in that group that I think could lend themselves to doing other work, then we try to offer that as an opportunity. We actually did have a staff member who's come on board who is actually learning a little bit about dealing with some content writing and some stuff for web, but she also trained as a swim teacher, so a little bit of cross-pollination and making things interesting. And I think that's the thing for us, that's probably the biggest thing, is finding those people that are on the same sort of wavelength. They've got similar values, they've got similar beliefs. It's been a hard thing for both my hubby and I to go, well, you know what, employees are going to be what they are, you know what I mean? We can't force them to live and breathe the business like we do. But if we can sort of create an environment where they feel they can come on that journey with us and share that with us, for even if it's a short period of time. You know, I've had people who've come and worked with me who are carers, and unfortunately they haven't been able to keep it going because of things going on in their world. And so, you know, we acknowledge that you know, business is tricky, employing others can be tricky, but there are definitely some rewards to be had out there, Gladys. So I definitely would encourage that as an opportunity for her to think about. I guess just having that more formal structure so that people know what they're dealing with. And so that's something that I've definitely over the years have had to sort of upskill myself on. Okay, well, how do I write an employment contract? What is, you know, keeping on top of legislation and fair work and WHS, and you know, there's a lot to it, but for me it's good. It gives me a lot of stuff to get my digging.
And have you just used, in regards to that sort of learning, have you just used sort of government learning platforms, or ask people in the field, or what will you recommend as far as doing that research and that learning?
I think there are lots of good resources online, and a lot of them I tend to go for the ones that are the government ones because they tend to be the peak bodies that develop it. But also I guess, looking at different industries, talking to other employers. So, you know, when I was being mentored to be a swim teacher, for example, I was taking in information from the manager, you know what I mean? I'd be talking to them, well, how do you run this and why do you do that? You know, I'm always asking questions to find out more so that I can sort of then go, oh, okay, now I might go back and do some more research on that. I'm lucky enough, my mum is actually a HR manager, or was when she's actually retired now, but she was, so she was a really good source of, you know, linking me up with some of those dots, you know, of where to find stuff. But yeah, look, there's lots of good things out there. It's just a matter of deciding which will apply to your business and how you want to run it. Initially, when we first started, we were sole traders and contractors for different projects, but now we are a company, so we've changed our business structure over the years as well, and you know, that's a big learning curve as well as to how that can operate. And so having good relationships with our accountant and legal and all that sort of stuff are really important along the way. And you know, we've actually had to fire a few of those people and move on. And I think that's the thing, as a business owner, you've got to realise there will be ups and downs in all of that, good, bad and ugly, as I call it often.
Thank you. Is it all right if I throw over to Deb now, please? Deb, did you want to come on mic now?
Hi, how's it going?
Good, thank you.
Good. Actually, the question I was going to ask, you got brought up at the end of this last conversation. I just didn't want to like unraise my hand in case you were like, it's just basically very generally, if I'm interested in starting my own business, like, where would you say to go to start learning about it? So, you know, I've done an internet search and had a browse in a few websites and, you know, general resources for like people wanting to start a small business. But do you have any sort of you know, like A, B, C, and D. Start with reading these things to start off.
Yeah, good question. I don't have a particular set order, but definitely if you looked at business.gov.au and a lot of those key agencies, yes, there'll be some information there, but it is fairly general. It's not going to tell you the nuts and bolts of your business, or the type of business that you're in. So my biggest recommendation is going and researching what other businesses are out there that are similar or the same sort of concepts. Is it worth investing your time and energy in it, particularly in your area? And that's the thing that, as a business owner, I respect the fact that there are other businesses out there doing, you know, things. They may do things similar, they may do things really differently, but trying to understand where maybe that gap is in the market is an important thing for us. You know, we sort of are setting ourselves apart because of the inclusion aspect and the way we customise things. I think also being able to find yourself a network of people that you do get on well with, and you can sort of ask those sort of questions, you know. And we actually, when we first started our business and we'd moved into the Hunter region, we did reach out to our business chamber, for example. And
that's a good idea.
Even though we had one person there that I would say probably gave us a few good tips, it wasn't the sole amount of information. I think for us, we just had to dig in and believe in what we do, but also do that little bit of back-end research around what this business could be or what other things are out there, so that we can either set ourselves apart or align with them. And that's the thing, like, I'm not afraid to partner up with another agency if they can either do it better or it's going to help our business along, you know what I mean, as well. So seeking opportunities to go on, you know, we may not be able to do it all, but can we sort of bounce off, you know? And with swimming, for example, you know, you've got Royal Life Saving, you've got Ausswim, all these really large peak organisations who are also very invested in seeing your business survive. So if your business has got, you know, key agencies like that that you could potentially use as well, I'd be looking at that as well in your research to find out more. Does that sort of help, Deb, I hope?
Yeah, I mean, it's given me a couple of really good ideas, like going to the local business chamber, looking at key agencies. I think, like everybody else, I'm looking into a business that I think I'm fairly confident I've got a bit of experience in, but it's more the, like, I've never started a business before, you know, and, like, part of it is obviously going to be when you start that business, some of it's just a process of discovery to see what kind of appetite there is out there for what you're offering.
Market research is quite a useful tool. There's a lot of avenues. I guess we use a lot of social media in our business. So, you know, when we were starting to sort of get a bit of an idea around offering, maybe potentially through the Creative Cook's Kitchen, which is an area we want to explore more about with the NDIA, and helping participants, you know, with life skills and or just getting in there and enjoying cooking for whatever that might bring them, you know, either creativity or other skills that intertwine with it. We put out a survey to market to find out what people were wanting, what they would expect, you know, to sort of try and draw some information out. I guess the other side of it is, you know, trying to bring a business together that people will understand, you know, in relation to the digital world. So if I put Creative Cook's Kitchen out there, it's a pretty general name. What does it really stand for? And I guess with our business, we try to, in our web design, for example, we would have that as our logo, but also obviously have lots of good information to describe what our business is and what it does. And again, don't be afraid to reinvent the wheel there with web design. You know, we've gone probably through, I think I'd say half a dozen different designs for definitely the web business, because it's changed over the years as to what our key focuses are. As I would say, if you went to Creative Cook's Kitchen website today after this session, in about a month's time it may change, because I do know in the back of my head there's some new things coming, and there'll probably be some new sort of thinking around what I offer. So, and same with the swim school, for example, over the years that's changed as well. You know, the information, how we've managed it, how we've monetized it. Being a swim school, everything's done online these days, for both right from the concept of coming in as an expression of interest right through to them paying their fees. So there's things like that too. You know, I think the business chamber they're sort of becoming a bit, I guess, because they're connected in with Service New South Wales, there has been a bit more of a push lately, particularly because of COVID, to try and help businesses navigate the digital business models.
Okay.
So that might be something of interest to you, depending on what you're offering in your service or whatever. Yeah.
Well, I was thinking of going into support coordination just because, like, I feel like I kind of end up doing it for free for a lot of
Do you?
Yeah, so perhaps if I just weigh in
Sorry.
here, there's a couple of things that spring to mind, and I don't necessarily want to get caught up on brands, so I can clarify what I want to say in the chat pod shortly when I hand over to Alex. But there are a couple of disruptor platforms in the disability and over 65 space where you might find that there's a really good testing ground for you to build yourself a profile that reads like that job role. Yes, you might need to sort of start at, support worker style remuneration while you get to sort of practice. And it reminds me of what Tracy said. I just have kept a finger in a couple of other pies, and I've got my, backup plans. And that might mean that she does have to delay the speed of which, she's operating business, or pivot the way she's saying they're pivoting on a fairly regular basis. But to me, joining one of those platforms, I've certainly seen it in front of my eyes directly happen, where people have pitched that type of role and being able to go and test the waters and not necessarily have a lot of overheads and not need to spend a lot of time on marketing. The other thing that I was thinking when you were talking about all of that was also, it's gone out my head now. A couple of people had talked about, a bit more about market research and things like that. And if you are doing this for free right now, my other tip would be, okay, doing it for free, get some testimonial down now. See how much of a sphere of influence those people that you're doing it for free have, and whether or not that can then take you on the next connection. Okay, so being able to think, okay, what's my current asset? If I'm doing this for free right now, what could I leverage off this? And it is really that mind shift into, yep, I might be doing it this way, and when I want to get some return on that, what would this space be able to create with that? Because I can tell you, for me in the role now, largely our new customer base is repeat business or peer referral. So can the people that you're doing it with right now, can they connect you to the next spot? That might be the paid spot. If can they provide you with testimonial and things that you'll be able to use to boost your presence, that you might have started out in a voluntary way, but that nobody necessarily needs to be really aware of that. But what can you actually get out of that that voluntary capacity that could then help you move this from unpaid to paid?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that's probably what inspired the idea, to be honest, because, I'm a single person that looks after two family members with disabilities. So I end up coming into contact with a lot of carers, and I found that, carers will ask me stuff about other clients, and I'm like, well, I did this, you should get them to try and do this. So I'm just like, well, I should think about this as a viable means of, actually getting paid for it. But that's what kind of came to mind, that would sort of be where the networking would start for me, just from
yeah, absolutely. The other thing, seeing as though we are in the speaking of NDIS culture, pay a lot of attention to this. One of the key drivers at the moment through the agency and all of its intersections is employment for people with disability, including entrepreneurship and micro business as well as business ownership. Whatever is being shared there actually isn't being written specifically for people with disability. The format might be that it's more digestible, for example, and things like that. But there's some awesome tools out there being developed right now. And given that we have got visibility of that, you may find there's some excellent connections for you about what's being shared for people with disability that want to get into this, and be in this space. One place, if you want one to start off with, is one of the ILC recipients, micro enterprise. So if you look them up, they'll actually be able to have a look at their site and what they're doing, because all those business concepts are the same. It's just that often they're being presented in ways that, well, for me, make more sense. I'm very much a person that goes straight to easy read. So the other part of the NDIS, we're familiar with the part called individual planning, and individual support and planning. The other big part of the NDIS is information linkages and capacity building, which, like all things, they shorten to ILC. And the difference between ILC and the individual packages that people with disability access is that the ILC is a grants-based process. So this is about grants and projects, and these ideas and products come as a result of those grants and projects. So you will find a whole new world if you start doing some research about information linkages and capacity building. And those grants roll out about every 3 to 6 months, and they're on different topics each time.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you. So, I hadn't heard of it. So
well, what's been great, Deb, is if you've given us some ideas about some other resources that we perhaps hadn't talked to. And there is a bit of conversation. Leanne's given some feedback in the chat pod, Deb, that you can read after this, along the lines of what I was talking about. I was actually thinking about another platform where there's a bit more flexibility about actually growing your own micro business. But she's certainly talking about her experience with one of those disruptors. So bit of food for thought. Exciting as this is, I think we might actually say thanks to Tracy. Feel free to put things in the chat pod, and as I said, Tracy will now be a very regular contributor in the Care Advantage series. So you'll certainly be able to access her, and I'll provide her details in the resource pack. Alex, I'm thinking that perhaps this flows quite well to those key points you were going to talk about, and I know that we're now sort of really down to the wire. So don't rush yours. I'm happy to wrap up with mine and just condense it, and then I might actually record a separate piece to hand out for my bit to people in the resource pack. So, Tracy, thank you on behalf of everybody. Thanks so much for sharing your story, and and such an exciting topic to think about, and especially while perhaps we're now all focused on winding down for the year and spending time in a different way. So I think that it's a good time to sort of perhaps think about New Year's resolutions and things, and one of those might be, could I dabble in the enterprise space? So thanks so much, Tracy. I'm going to hand over to Alex now, and I'll drop out of screen. Alex, I've given you
thanks so much, Michelle and Tracy. That was just, your depth of knowledge is just amazing. I'm wondering if there's some ongoing questions in this space, if we can really utilize your wealth of experience. That'd be really great for me as well.
I'd love to be involved. Okay. Just let me know.
Great. Okay, so I'll just put up my slides. And Michelle, I was also thinking the same. I can do a separate piece of this at another time. So I won't. I think that what we've covered and discussed has been really much more valuable, including all of that really industry relevant experience that we have a focus as carers being our audience. So what I'm going to just go through is more a really brief overview of the idea of starting a business. So I'll just go to slideshow. So simply looking at the avenue, I think starting at you've got to look at your research as Tracy was explaining, and it's going to be specific to what you want to do, but there is a great government resource to start with that sort of guides you through that step-by-step process. Really easy to follow information, how to comply with the government and taxation laws, of course, which is going to be important. And what sort of business structure to choose, and how to develop your business plan and your strategy. There is links to sort of grants and mentors and business advisors and all of that stuff. And then the more I've got bad network quality. Are people hearing me?
It's fine, Alex. Yeah,
it's
just
fine. Okay, sorry, just an alert. Sorry about that. Okay, so really just a brief overview of some main business types. So Tracy mentioned she started out as a sole trader. That is the most likely start for a business. Partnership is simply you are the business. So sorry, I'll just go to my notes. So you use your own tax file number. You've got full control of business and assets, and that means that also that there's no distinction between you and the business. So you're therefore personally liable if anything was to go wrong. It's really simple to set up, and there's not many startup costs. So the partnership is there, not too dissimilar. It's just where the income and losses are distributed between two or more people. I've given some examples of both of these. So I just wanted to point out that it's not the profession or the industry that determines your business type. That it's just really up to you and the individuals who start the business what kind of structure that you want to set up. So as you can see, Tracy explained that she started out as a sole trader, and obviously you can employ people as a sole trader. You need to then look at the legal and taxation issues around whether it's workers' compensation insurances. You have to look at obviously what you want to do. You need to have the guidelines behind that in regards to the structure. So the company structure is a separate legal entity. So it's controlled by directors, and it's more complex structure. You need to comply with the Corporations Act, and a company can be sort of sued as a separate entity there. So these are some of the terms that I just we all hear tossed around. So really freelancing is typically refer to the creative professionals, so the photographers out there. It's just everyone's a sole trader, and these are terms that are tossed around. I guess when we think about a contractor, I guess that's sort of more being used in the space for perhaps these so within like aged care, you might be a contractor. So you might have it was more typically like a group of or a firm, but it can also be a sole trader. A gig worker is the kind of the newer platforms. So it's these so the disruptor platforms that Michelle's talking to. So employees, depending on specifications of the contract. So some examples are the Hire Up and the Mabel, and the Uber and the Airtasker, to name a few. So I think that looking at some of the benefits, I think flexibility, Tracy talked to. I guess starting up your own thing, you choose what you do, how you do it, but obviously there's some challenges to that that Tracy explained very well. And I guess, you know, choosing the pace that you go at, you can stop when your caring responsibilities become relevant. But yeah, I guess what Tracy's really pointing to is that, you know, you've got to also know your limits and your boundaries. So just whatever decision you make as, you know, applying to a role and being employed, there's going to be adjustments, as Michelle's talked about. And so I think that one of the good things with self-employment is really, you know, hopefully, you know, going to be working to your strengths. So I know that many of you already, you know, have a lot of skills and depth of experience out there. So self-employment might really be that avenue for you to exploit that. And then this is probably going to lead into what Michelle will talk about. But so startup costs are things to consider. As I said, you know, as Michelle talked to, there's these grants that are industry specific. So really, depending on what you're doing, what you're looking into, there are sort of state, federal government grants going, and then, you know, within different schemes like the NDIS that Michelle talked about. Something that Tracy mentioned around really, you've got to be aware that there ebbs and flows and be able to manage that. So whether or not it's having savings or having alternative income, looking at your marketing strategy, is it collaborating? Really being aware that this is an issue that's going to be ongoing. So how to manage that, and then as well the future security. So there's various insurances that you can obviously purchase. There's some that are compulsory. I think that for many of you, public liability and professional indemnity, if you're going to be providing advice, I think they might be some sort of necessary insurances. But, you know, so you're looking into those requirements, and then you know, considering future security, so you can look into your own you know, life, death insurance policies. As you know, when you're self-employed, you don't have that benefit of the super. So yeah, I guess this is all I've covered very, very briefly. Apologies for the brief overview, but I think what we did was focus on some really great examples with Tracy. So I will just hand back over to Michelle. I'll just drop out of.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, we have hit 11 o'clock. And so, as I said, I'll make a recording of what I wanted to talk about. Just very quickly. The focus of the resource that we're handing out as part of this session is something called a lean canvas, and I've made a lean canvas practice example for you to have a look at. Be really happy to look at your lean canvas next year. It is the number one thing that I hand out to people who have got a great idea and are particularly experiencing all the romance that goes with coming up with making a change in the world. And so this will give you a really good idea of, you know, one pager about whether or not you're going forward and really having a good look at, yeah, what are the segments that I'll need to consider. So as I said, I have made one up for us to and we'll also give you a blank one to start working on. And both Alex, myself and Tracy be more than happy to work with people that are interested in putting one together. To finish, but today, thank you all very much for your time and contribution, whether it's been your first webinar or whether you've been with us throughout the series. We'd like to both express you know, our gratitude about you sharing this experience with us and giving us feedback about how we can continue to, you know, make improvements and continue, you know, delivering in the spaces that you're interested in. So we wish you all and your families the very best over the the festive season, and thank you so much again for joining us. We look forward to kicking off. It's mid-January next year that we have one booked for, and we look forward to kicking off in that January one. If you're not around, feel free to get a ticket, and we'll have the calendar of events out early in the new year. So thanks so much. Take care. Stay safe, and I hope you get to have a lovely time with your families. See you.
Bye, everyone.